Hello, my name is Mr. Anderson, and today we are going to talk about what is globalization. So, to start, you may very well ask, what is globalization? Well, essentially, globalization is a global movement towards ever expanding economic and social ties that countries have with each other. And these ties are made possible by multinational corporations. Now, the last word might seem kind of big and scary to you, but trust me, it's not that hard, as you will see in a minute. To start, though, you might very well ask yourself, is Metro Vancouver connected to this globalized world? Is our airport connected to the globalized world? And essentially, the answer is yes, we are both connected. And the reason why is because of the Pacific Rim economy. The Pacific Rim economy is the world's largest economy in the world. It covers the entire Pacific Ocean. Canada, China, Japan, South Korea, United States, Australia, Philippines are all part of this Pacific Rim economy. So these countries are fairly big. But thinking about countries, though, we may also want to remind ourselves what is the difference between a developed and a developing country. And essentially, a developed country is a country that is wealthy, has technology, stable government, freedoms, and equality for its citizens. We used to call that first world country. To be developing country, which is used to be called third world, is a country that's trying to be developed. But since we've been talking about globalization, you want to think about the global village. And essentially, the global village is a concept where the world is considered to be one single community that lives on this planet. And this single community is the result of the incredible advancements in telecommunications technologies in the last 10 plus years. The incredible advancements that have occurred ever since GPS technology had been demilitarized by the American government in the 1990s. And this is made possible by companies that create smartphones. But if we're going to go back to thinking about countries, there are essentially different organizations that represent different countries. A G7 or a G20 country. A G7 country is a group of countries who have finance ministers and or bank governors who represent the most advanced economies in the world, according to the IMF, International Monetary Fund. G20 is literally greater 20 countries in the world, just like how G7 represents greater 7. And to be in the G7, the countries are Canada, United States of America, Great Britain, France, Germany, Japan, and Italy. A few years ago, Russia was also a member of the G7. And the G7 used to be called G8, but because of the ongoing crisis in the Ukraine and the Crimea Peninsula, Russia was removed. There are also some other globalized financial terms, such as non-governmental organizations, or NGOs, heavily indebted countries, HIDC, and Millennium Development Goals. Others to think about is you want to think and ask yourself, what is the World Bank? What is the International Monetary Fund? And is our Bank of Canada connected to all these? I'm not going to give you the answers, but these might be very good topics for you to explore on your own time after this video is finished. But keeping with the economic focus and globalization, we must look at how global economies have become integrated. And essentially, the economies of all our countries in the world have an increasing reliance on each other. And the reason why is because essentially it provides more opportunities to buy and sell goods to any country in the world. The opportunities for labor and capital to locate anywhere in the world is far greater if you have trade. And this has led to all markets to grow essentially. You notice this picture on the left hand side? You might want to ask yourself, how has Wall Street become globalized? That's a very good question. But keeping with the financial focus, we want to think about also Canada's integration into the global economy. And one area that I think is very interesting is projects. No, not the projects where you do in class. No, these are projects that include construction workers, that include lots of money. And a mega project is associated with globalization because a mega project is an extremely large project that has more than $1 billion that's being spent. And all levels of government are involved. It has a massive impact on the environment, such as the Port Mann Bridge in Metro Vancouver or the Air Canada and their Dreamliners. This is all part of our integration into the global economy because essentially Canada and Vancouver, we are the middle persons. We get the materials from Asia and ship them to America to be bought. What are these materials? Essentially are commodities. Commodities are raw natural goods. And for British Columbia, our biggest trading partner is not the Americans. Our biggest trading partner are the Eastern Asian countries such as China, Japan, South Korea. But still, keeping with the focus, how of all this integration economies is made possible. This is made possible because, as I mentioned, with airplanes and smartphones, GPS, it is essentially technology. Without technology fueling communication networks, more high-speed internet access, as well as the collapse of communism and the movement towards free trade in the world, this will never have been possible. But speaking of free trade, there has been a couple free trade agreements. One noteworthy for Canadians is NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement. NAFTA is a trading bloc between Canada, the United States, and Mexico. It was negotiated by the Canadian Prime Minister Brian Mulroney. And NAFTA is essentially a agreement which allows these three countries to trade goods and commodities with each other without having to pay punitive taxes. But, just to remind ourselves, NAFTA is not the biggest trading bloc in the world. The biggest trading bloc is that Pacific Rim economy, which has only been made possible because of globalization. So, what are some of the benefits for trade? Some of the benefits are increased choices for the consumers, increased choices for potential growth for companies to gain new consumers to sell their goods to, increase growth of our economies because the economies are buying and selling goods, as well as increase opportunities for employment to people who want to leave their original country and go live somewhere else to work. It is all about more, more, more. But there are some other unfortunate disadvantages. As you can see up in the picture, there are some very nasty, ugly sides potentially towards globalization. For one, the increased gap of the rich and poor is widening. There's a dominance of global trade by the rich Northern Hemisphere countries. The Northern Hemisphere countries get richer, the Southern Hemisphere countries, such as countries in Africa, are getting poorer. Additionally, there's a lack of opportunities for the poor people to have access to this globalized market because they don't have that technology. They are being left behind or are being exploited in the globalized movement. Do you know which country has the largest gap between the rich and the poor? It might surprise you, or it may not, but it is the United States, the most powerful country in the world's biggest economy, but a consumer economy. Globalization is powered by the American consumer economy, but yet they have the biggest gap between the rich and poor. Do you remember or ever heard about that whole Occupy Wall Street movement? That's another really interesting topic you may want to research more into. So now we've taken a little chance to look at the different issues. Why do companies, multinational corporations, MNCs, expand? To start, we should ask ourselves, what is a multinational corporation? That was that big word I talked about several minutes ago. But a multinational corporation is essentially a company who has its corporate headquarters, so their head office, in one country, but they will sell their goods and commodities, stuff in other countries outside of their home country. You can have, example, a company located in Canada, but you can have stores in the United States, Australia, Japan, and France. That's a multinational corporations. And why do they expand in a globalized market? They expand to gain more revenue, so more money, expand to lower their costs of doing business, cheaper labor. They expand to get new, cheaper raw materials, so maximizing profit, control supplies, control the processing, and control the global economy. It's all about the business. But there are some negatives, such as the damage to the environment, the exploitation of labor in developing countries, market domination of monopolies, indigenous cultures being damaged severely because these companies do not have a connection to the land. Non-renewable resources are being used, such as oil, coal, instead of renewable energies, and overall damage to local cultures. So, there you have it. A basic introduction to what is globalization and how do these companies fit. Please go check the website if you want to have the exact reference breakdown. I want to say thank you to the site of Creative Commons for all the images that were used in this podcast. See you next time.